Today is our introduction to CVs. We'll talk about what is a CV, why would you need one, what would you use it for, and the beginnings of how to actually create yours. So what is a CV? The CV stands for Curriculum Vitae, or Vita. There are a lot of nicknames, but they all mean the same thing. A Curriculum Vitae is Latin for the course of your life, which means that a CV is basically a summary of someone's entire career. The more experience you gain, the longer your CV will become. So how is a CV different than a resume? CVs originated in academics, and they are the standard for most medical professions. When you think about the purpose of a CV, consider professors trying to apply for tenure. They have to show all of their academic accomplishments, which means they list every publication, project, presentation, course they've taught, award, etc., to prove that they qualify for tenure. Thus, the running total of their qualifications. Hence, a CV can and should be a couple to several pages long. In contrast, a resume is a pointed, brief overview of relevant skills and experiences tailored to a specific position. It is typically 1 page, sometimes 2 pages long max. Resumes are often more stylish as they are designed to catch someone's eye. CVs are usually pretty plain and try to let the experience speak for itself. What you include in your CV will depend upon your own personal experience. There are a lot of possibilities, but most commonly your CV will include name, contact information, education, honors and awards, research, publications, presentations, professional experiences, licensure, certifications, teaching experiences, etc. While with a resume you will definitely cater to each position you apply for, it isn't as necessary to do so in a CV. But it does depend upon your purpose, especially because many professionals use CVs for other purposes besides attaining a job. If you are using your CV as a job application tool, you might decide to rearrange some information or emphasize different points based on what you're applying for. For example, if you are applying for a pediatric position, you might want to make your experience working in a day camp with children much more obvious. Or maybe you speak Spanish, so you might decide to make that skill more prominent if you are applying for a Spanish-speaking position. Creating a CV can be overwhelming and time-consuming, especially if you have a deadline to apply for a job. So that's why we are going to start your CV now, and we are going to finish it in small, manageable pieces. Start by doing a brainstorm to list all of your qualifications, experiences, credentials, etc. Consult the list of typical items found on a CV for ideas. But don't limit yourself to those categories either. Write everything down. Don't judge whether or not it is good enough or if it belongs. After you have your list, then you can decide what is most appropriate to include. Next, order your qualifications and experiences with the most relevant and most recent experiences first. Most employers will not be as interested in something you did 8 years ago compared to what you're up to right now. For example, your Eagle Scout Award was a big accomplishment, but if you haven't done anything since, you probably have a problem. So a CV can become fairly long and many pages. So something to consider as you are formatting and creating your CV is keep it simple, inclusive, but concise. You might say, well, what does that mean, Amber? Basically, you are just trying to include the important stuff without adding fluff. If you are adding just something to make your CV look longer, then just don't do it. People can usually tell what you're doing. For most of you, longer than 2 pages is not necessary and maybe not even appropriate. You simply just don't have that much experience yet in most cases. And since you'll be using this primarily as a job application tool right now, most people won't want to sift through dozens of pages anyways. So let's start your CV. The style of your CV matters, actually a lot. It will make it visually and mentally easy or overwhelming for others to scan and read your CV. You'll have the opportunity to find samples of CV formats you like. Hopefully they will help serve as a guide for you. But for the purposes of your CV assignments in PD5, you are meant to create a pretty basic black and white, no fancy or clever texts formatting, and definitely no photos of yourself type of a CV. And that is because everyone should have a traditional CV on hand and most of the jobs you will be applying for will prefer the simple, professional style of a traditional CV. Now, you might find a really seductive CV format you'd really like to mimic. Go for it. But you'll have to save that CV for use in other purposes and not for this assignment. Furthermore, we'll talk more about formatting and style later as your CV develops and grows. So let's start with the header. Your header is your name and contact information. There are a lot of different styles and formats, so choose the one you like best. But again, for the purposes of this class, keep it within the bounds of a traditional basic format. Include your name. Use the same name you will be using on your employment documents. If you prefer a nickname, you can put your nickname in parentheses or quotations to show your preference. Stylistically, my preference is for the name to be bigger than everything else. It helps you stand out and adds a little bit of style to an otherwise pretty basic and sometimes boring CV. Also consider using only 2 fonts, one for headers and one for the body of your content. Don't go too extreme on the fonts that you choose. They should be easy to read. One of the last things you will do with your CV is to do a final style and format review. So you don't have to make the style and the formatting perfect just yet. We're just getting started. Next, include your contact information. This should be at minimum an address. You can even put 2 addresses if you want. You can see that one of the samples here show my home address and my business address. This would be an appropriate choice if you have a permanent address, as sometimes employers prefer not to hire individuals from out of state. You could sometimes even put a note that you're planning to relocate somewhere if you think that would help. Also include your phone number, and while you're at it, just make sure your voicemail message is professional, and include your email address too. And again, make sure that one is professional too, not something you created when you were 12 years old, something sexually inappropriate or immature, or something that just doesn't show you as the professional PAC that you were trying to become. Next, you will add your education section to your CV. This section should be reserved for regionally accredited colleges and universities you have attended. If you've attended trade schools or other certification type programs, or maybe a program with the military, for example, you might decide that goes in a different section. Start with the degree you are pursuing here at Rocky Mountain University, or the most recent education goes first, and you work backwards chronologically. There are many different stylistic ways you can choose to format your education section, but here are the basics that you are expected to have. The institution name. Location. City and state is adequate. Degree and the status of your degree. Your major or area of study. There are other optional information you can include, including a minor, dates of attendance, GPA, organizations, projects, clubs, sports groups, honors, etc. Dates of attendance are optional, but you will most likely want to include your graduation date so employers can gauge your level of experience and not think that you are portraying yourself as a graduate when you are not. GPA is optional, and if you are proud of your GPA, I would certainly be sure to include that. Otherwise, it's not a big deal to leave off. You may decide that clubs, sports teams, honors research, and other associated educational experiences fit well in this section, or you may choose to put those elsewhere, and we will cover those options in a later screencast. Here is a sample of my education section on my CV. Notice how I have the most recent education at the top, and I work backwards in chronological order. I have the name of the institution and the location. And this is important because sometimes there are multiple locations for a school, different campuses, for example, or multiple schools with similar names. There's also a degree, so you can see Doctor of Philosophy, Master of Education, Bachelor of Science, with the area of study, which is usually a major. And if you are still enrolled, it is appropriate to put the anticipated graduation date so people do not get the impression you are trying to pass yourself off as a graduate. So let's talk about your education. What are you going to put on your CV? It's my observation there are at least half a dozen ways people can put their education down incorrectly on a CV. So first, the university you attend is called Rocky Mountain University of Health Professions, not Rocky Mountain University for Health Professions or of healthcare providers or anything else. I've been amazed at how many students don't even know the correct name of the school they go to. What do you think that reflects about you as a job candidate if you don't even know the name of the school you are attending? And so many people incorrectly list their degrees. Specifically, you are getting a Master of Physician Assistant Studies degree. That's what MPAS stands for. You are not getting a Master of Science, an MS degree, or a Master of Physician Assistant degree. It is important you list your degree correctly. And again, you are not getting a Master's of Physician Assistant Studies. That's Master's with an S. Adding the S to Master's is informal. It's not the best fit for a CV. It's actually incorrect. So to clarify, you are not getting a Master's of Physician Assistant Studies, but a Master of Physician Assistant Study degree. The same goes for bachelor's. Adding the S is informal. We usually use that when we're not writing out the entire name of the degree, which you will want to do for your CV. You're going to write out your degree, Bachelor of Science, or Bachelor of Art, or Bachelor of Nursing, or Bachelor of Social Work, etc. Most commonly, people get a Bachelor of Science, a BS, or a Bachelor of Art, BA degree. If you aren't sure what degree you actually received from your university or college, find your diploma or transcript and see what it says. And then also include your major. Another super common mistake that I see is that people say they got a Bachelor of Biology or a Bachelor of Economics or a Bachelor of Business. In most schools, that is not what the degree is actually called. So it would probably be a Bachelor of Science or a Bachelor of Art in Biology or Economics or Business. You can and should include other universities and colleges you've attended, even if you did not graduate. You can simply just not list the degree if that's the case. You could say prerequisites for PA school or undergraduate coursework, for example. By the way, the formatting here is just a sample. If you have an associate's degree, it is also important to include that here as well. Just like the bachelor and master degree, you will not add an S to associates. It would be Associate of Science degree, Associate of Applied Science degree, etc. And by the way, the formatting here is just a sample for you. Please write out your degrees and your university name, but if you choose to list your degree first or want to make the style look different, of course, that is your choice. Like I said before, we are trying to keep this CV writing process simple because, duh, you are super busy with rotations, you've got a lot on your plate, and CVs are overwhelming. So we're going to put together your CV in small pieces. So part of your first CV assignment is to find 5 sample CVs online that appeal to you, that look good, that you think, hey, I wouldn't mind reading over that. And you can tell the difference. There will be some CVs you'll see that you look at and just say, oh, that's just too overwhelming to even look at. So find the ones that you like, and I want you to submit screenshots of them in the Google Classroom. Next, I want you to use those samples to give you ideas so that you can start formatting your own CV. Create your own header, which includes your name and contact information. Record your education or your degrees from all schools. Remember that Rocky Mountain should be listed first. And since you aren't graduated yet, you should account for that by saying something like anticipated graduation with a month and year of your graduation date. And remember to keep the formatting simple and traditional. And that's all for today.